Koto, Markie here in the car, so if you hear background noise, that's what it is. It's not me making a buzzing noise. On our newly renamed YouTube channel, and this is also going on Patreon as well. And this is a very special one because we have my beloved, my wife and Rangimarie and business partner and many things.
Partner in crime,
the beautiful Gwendoline. She's with us today.
Hi everyone.
I wanted to talk about something really important actually, and this is a heavy one, okay? But hopefully this will be helpful to a lot of people. And this is a message I really want to get out there to lots of people. So please consider sharing this and doing all the things that help make it more prominent, like hitting the like button and subscribing and all that malarkey. So I want to talk about what some people refer to as domestic violence. I suppose that's a term that's still used most often. Sometimes it's called family violence. Sometimes it's called domestic abuse, family abuse. I could call it relationship abuse. I prefer the term, I've done another video on this, I prefer the term abuse rather than violence. Just want to say, out of the context, that we tend to talk about domestic violence, tend to talk about it with the assumption that it's sort of in a heteronormative relationship between a man and a woman. And although that is the most common relationship or family abuse, it's not the only one. So it happens from women to men, it happens among people who are gender diverse, it happens in gay relationships, it happens from children to parents and among siblings and in all different combinations. So just for simplicity, we might be kind of using the stereotype of the male versus female for kind of examples in this video. It doesn't mean that we're ignoring all those other scenarios. Anything you want to add at this point?
Great point to make, Markie, and especially some of the lesser kind of spoken of examples that you mentioned. For example, child to parent. They all have similar kind of elements to them. Really great to emphasize that this content does not exclude those other scenarios. So thanks for saying that, Markie.
This is a question that I hear a lot. Not so much from people that I know, probably because I move in circles that are quite enlightened in this area, but I hear this a lot online, in comment sections under videos, on TV. How many times have you heard this? The phrase, if he's so abusive, or as clearly he's been so abusive, and he's been horrendous, why on earth didn't she leave? How many times do you think you've heard that?
Yeah, many times, definitely. Yeah.
And so it's a question that's commonly asked, and to me it's obvious. It's absolutely obvious to me, but that's because I've kind of been involved in this world and studied it. But actually, fair enough. I guess it's a fair question if you don't know that much about domestic abuse, and hopefully you don't, because that means you've probably not had to experience it or been involved in it, which is good, and I hope you never do. Although it's frighteningly common, so it's worth, even if you've not had any involvement in this dark world, it's worth listening to this still, because it's so common. You will know people that have been victims, and you'll probably know people that have been perpetrators as well. They won't tell you they're perpetrators, but you will know them. There'll be your next door neighbours, people in your street, people that you work with. You will know domestic violence perpetrators, and you definitely know domestic violence victims. Not necessarily current, but at some point in their life. So why doesn't she leave? If you're being horribly abused, you'd get yourself out of there, wouldn't you? That's kind of logical. We move towards things that we like, and we move away from things that we don't like. This is all to do with the mechanics of domestic abuse. So it doesn't appear out of nowhere in its full form. It emerges gradually. So in a relationship, a new relationship, where domestic abuse eventually becomes apparent, it will not be present in the early stages. There'll be a honeymoon period, because domestic abusers don't make it known that they're controlling, power-seeking, abusive to their partners, they are charm itself. And one of the reasons they're charm itself is often they are people who are on the narcissistic or the psychopathic spectrum, and having a superficial charm is one of the things that goes with that territory. So initially, charming as anything will charm the birds down from the trees, and often the early stages of an abusive relationship will involve love bombing, which bonds the eventual victim to the perpetrator very quickly and very strongly. And then the abusive behaviour starts subtly and slowly, and it builds. But it doesn't usually begin with horrendous physical violence or sexual violence. It tends to begin with a very subtle gaslighting and undermining. Tell them about gaslighting, Gwendoline, because that's your favourite film, isn't it?
The term comes from the movie, which has now got several iterations. I think, what was the first one, Markie? What year would you reckon, roughly?
Oh, it was in the
1930s
or 40s.
That's what I was thinking, 1940s. So,
yeah.
Well, and
we watched the wrong one, didn't we?
Well, no, I liked it.
You haven't forgiven me for it. You thought it was a comedy, didn't you?
Well,
it
was kind of badly acted. But, I think it's a great term, I think, because, the essence of the story, guys, if you've never seen it and you're not familiar with this term, is that it was a husband and wife, the protagonists, and the husband, over quite a significant period of time, just began messing with his wife's head, really. So, for example, he would change the room around. I'm giving you examples. I'll build up to the gaslighting and where that term comes from. He might change the room around, and the wife would come home and think that, what's going on? That was over there before, wasn't it? And he'd say, no, not at all. Why are you saying that? And so she'd feel crazy. So when I use the term crazy making, that's what I mean when I use the term crazy making, which is almost synonymous with So someone making you, so the sky's blue. No, it's brown. What? Hang on, what? Maybe it is brown and I'm not right. So this built with this storyline where husband eventually started messing with the lights in the house
because he was trying to steal all the valuables.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So there's financial abuse in there as well.
And when he lit the gaslight in the one room, the gaslight in the room she was in would dim slightly.
Right.
And she would say, "Oh, the gaslight keeps dimming," and he would say, "Oh, you're not yourself."
That's right. Yeah. So to the point where she, he would start saying to her, "I think you need to go and lie down. I think you're not right." And I think there were doctors involved and diagnosed her with some kind of hypochondria or something. But it was hysterical
disease.
Yeah.
Probably in that era.
Exactly.
The cure of which is a slap around the face, probably, knowing how things were portrayed on television.
Exactly. So yeah, that's where the term gaslighting comes from.
So gaslighting is one of the techniques that's used, but a big one is isolation. So an abusive partner will, by hook or by crook, manage to isolate their partner from their friends, their family, so that there's no other influences on them. So nobody else can say, are you sure are you sure you're okay? You don't look yourself, you're not as happy as you were, or question anything. When you start to become deluded, which is what happens, you've got nobody else to tell you or to put you on the right track. So isolation, gaslighting, and undermining. If you're in that situation, all your opinions will be made wrong, and you'll gradually be told that you don't know anything about anything, and that you're a bit of an idiot, really, and your opinion or your thoughts can't be trusted on anything, and that you need them to kind of show the path of wisdom. This is exactly the same thing that cults do. Cults love bomb you in the early stages. They isolate you from your family. They tell you that your old opinions are all worthless, and they tell you what to think. And that is exactly what happens in an abusive relationship. And it may or may not develop into physical violence, because it's all about control. So the physical violence will come in if the other methods, if the gaslighting, the isolation and the undermining aren't enough to get you in perfect control according to that other person. That's when they'll use physical violence. They might use sexual violence as a means of control, or they might use sexual violence just for their own gratification. Now, imagine you've been in this situation for any length of time and what that's going to do to you psychologically, okay? And, victims, well, Gwendoline, you can probably answer this one. What do victims of early stages of domestic abuse tend to say about their partners? They don't tend to say, he's terrible, he's abusing me, what do they say? What's your experience of what kind of thing they'll say in the early stages?
I think in the early stages there's obviously a lot of denial. It's really painful for the person to even begin to comprehend the situation that they're in, if they can even begin to recognise it. So I think there's just so much denial, just complete obliviousness often. And when you're in a relationship, there's often layers, a lot of things come together to intersect with one another. So the person might be financially reliant on their partner. That adds another layer of complexity, right? Their partner might be, also what's maybe less spoken about in this sort of scenario is the identification with the partner or with themselves almost as a victim. And there's something very often I find when I work with patients in this realm that there's a reason why they chose that partner, and sometimes it's because they remind themselves of someone in their family. And so in a way, if you begin to think about the possibility of ending or changing that relationship, it's not just that relationship that they begin to feel that you're threatening. It's something that goes way deeper. So there's lots of ways that this can manifest, or it could be that they have a particular lifestyle with that abusive partner that they're also very attached to, especially if it's one of wealth and things like that. So there can be all sorts of reasons. It's quite painstaking often on both sides. I would say often you won't really meet patients in this stage generally, because they're so immersed in that where they are that they obviously won't seek any therapy.
They don't see a problem at that stage. And if they do, then they'll see, he's been working very hard lately. He's very stressed.
Right. Lots of excuses.
And sometimes there's a belief that they can fix them. If they do spot nasty tendencies in their partner, they can somehow fix it. The other thing that goes on as well with the perpetrator is that they will reinstate that love bombing from time to time. The love bombing is so powerful that it builds in the victim's mind a belief that the partner is wonderful, and it takes a long time for that belief that what we experience first, this has been proven, stays with us longest and has biggest impact. So I did an exercise on a course the other day where it had a description of the same person presented in different ways with their good points and their bad points. So the good points were, something like, very loyal, very funny, very educated. And then it went on to say, tends to steal and become violent. And then they put the same thing in the other way around. And you ended up kind of liking the one version of the person and hating the other version of the person. So they can return briefly to that love bombing as well, which again is another crazy making method. Kind of keeps people in control, really. It's brainwashing. It's literally brainwashing. And what they've found is that victims of relationship abuse suffer more than soldiers that have been, or service people that have suffered torture and torture. And part of the reason that the service people recover more quickly and more fully is, first of all, the torturers are already established as the enemy. They're not established as they're somebody that they love, and also it's a group experience. And also at the end of the torture, if they're released, then their ordeal is publicly and unequivocally recognised. Nobody minimises it. Nobody says, you were tortured. Well, that's nothing. You probably brought it on yourself, or you made it up. Everyone will say, that's awful, you're a hero. But with people with domestic abuse, they don't. So these are the kind of the psychological reasons why people don't just leave. Practical reasons often includes, because you were saying about the financial thing, weren't you? So often, that expression barefoot and pregnant, an analogy for abusive partners keeping their partner vulnerable and incapable of escaping. Because if you're barefoot, you can't run very far. So not literally barefoot and pregnant, but kept isolated from friends. So who do you go to? Terrified, because murder in domestic abuse situations happens most often when the person tries to leave. So they're most vulnerable when they try to leave, and they know that. They know that on some level. They haven't got access to money or finances. So how far can you get if you haven't got access to the car keys? You haven't got any money. You know, where are you gonna? You haven't got any friends anymore. Where are you gonna go? How far are you gonna get? And things like pets. Pets are a big blackmail. You know, often partners will, and children. I should mention children first, probably, really, but I tend to think of animals. Often partners, they'll threaten the children, or the partner thinks that if they're not around to protect the children, maybe the partner will start abusing the children instead. Or they will actively threaten that. They'll actively say, "Oh, if you leave me, I will kill you." Or if you leave me, I will kill you, and I will kill the kids. If you leave me, I will kill myself, and you'll be to blame. If you leave me, I will kill the cat, or I'll torture the cat, or I'll harm the cat. So I hope that kind of answers the question, because I can't imagine how I would get out of a situation like that. And that is why I've got huge admiration for people that get themselves out of these situations. You know, massive admiration. But the secret, but I don't want to leave the impression that it's impossible, because the thing is, there are agencies, depending on where you are in the world, of course, but there are agencies whose very job is to support you and help you do this, and they are very discreet about, you know, if you phone them, about them not phoning you back, or, you know, compromising you, or giving away the fact that you've contacted them. So that's very possible. But the secret, well, first of all, the secret is learning how not to get into these kind of relationships in the first place. Easier said than done. It can take a long time to learn that, but there are things you can learn that can help that. And also, the sooner you get yourself out, the easier it is, because the longer you're in there, the more you're going to lose your sense of identity and self. You won't know, you know, you can imagine even a short period of that kind of brainwashing, you're not going to know who you are or what you are, where you're going, what you want, and you're going to think on some level that you probably deserve that kind of treatment. Which is terrible. That's why the in a way, although the physical stuff, you know, is horrendous, sexual stuff is horrendous, the brainwashing and the psychological damage is probably still the worst thing out of this kind of abuse, because it damages your soul. You know, it's that deeper level. So that is why they don't just leave. Any final words?
I think I feel like that was pretty comprehensive, Markie, and I will just speak to your final point really about the severity of emotional abuse and coercive control, and abuse that doesn't necessarily leave a physical mark. What's interesting, I learned this years ago, and I thought it's very simple, but it's so true, that we may sometimes forget, is that, again, where there is one form of abuse, there is always another.
Yeah, or if there isn't yet, it's just a matter of time.
That's true too. Yeah. But I would argue that, you know, to your point, Markie, about emotional abuse being, you know, among the most severe forms of abuse, I agree. And I guess for me, the way I make that connection and that link around this rule, which I believe to be true, of where there's one form of abuse, there's always another. So, for example, if somebody is, as Markie was saying, you know, brainwashing, I think that is really a very succinct way of capturing what emotional abuse, how it evolves, really. And I think that's accurate. Where that's going on, you know, our emotions are connected to our physical bodies. So if you're in a situation like that where you feel diminished, and as Markie said, one thing you didn't mention, Markie, that I thought was also another kind of red flag and ubiquitous with this kind of thing, is withholding. So withholding, yes, and freezing you out. Whether that's locking you out of the house or literally not returning your calls, stop it, running off. And one I heard recently, actually, in the course of my clinical work, you know, somebody going off, telling their family, they're not telling them where they are, but they're away from everybody, and they're distressed. So kind of emotionally blackmailing the family. So these are other ways. But yes, so if you're in that situation and you haven't been hit, but sure as heck your body is going to go through lots of stress in that situation, and so there you go, you can wind up having, you know, some kind of ulcer or heart attack. So I agree with that sentiment of, you know, where there's one form of abuse, there's always another. I also want to kind of second Markie's affirmation for those who find themselves in this situation in terms of freeing yourself and the courage that requires. It's important to acknowledge that. I would agree with Markie. The first step is, if you can, avoid this kind of... So the love bombing is actually a good stage in which to involve your dear friends, your best friend, tell them what's happening and talk about it. It might be that the person is really oblivious and that it's totally unconscious awareness on the other person's part, and it can be worked through and thought about. But on the other hand, it might be a more sinister, beginning of something that you don't really want to get involved in. And really, I suppose, again, another part that is less thought about and more in the analytic concept and the analytic world, we think about the painful aspect of what we have taken into ourselves in order for that to feel comfortable somehow. So if we are feeling good in a way, and I hear this in the lyrics. I just learnt a song, actually, and when I broke down the lyrics, it was just this tale of deep abuse, and that, for me, listening to it with my analytic head, be on my channel if you're interested, you can subscribe and check it out. But in my head, I was thinking, God, there's so many red flags in this song that she's singing about this relationship. It's called love as well, kind of ironic.
Yeah.
We have to get to a stage, it won't be in the beginning, but get to a stage where we are able to interrogate the parts of us that actually, usually because of childhood experiences, feel comfortable in that darkness, in that pain. And if we can really address that, then we will never, ever find ourselves in a destructive relationship again, because we'll know it when we see it immediately and remove ourselves from any harmful situation. So, though that's the grander work, but in the first instance, just reach out to anybody, tell someone, take that first step. We're here, even if you're not sure. And I would really encourage you, if you're not sure, to definitely reach out and just check it out. There's no harm in asking questions and just checking out if you feel a bit uncertain about your safety, making sure that you really are fine. And there might be something else going on that feels difficult or painful, but it might not be as severe as all of that. So get that reassurance. There's no harm in asking. Send our cars for MOTs and for checks, don't we? We never do that for ourselves. So absolutely. That's my final word really, is just please talk to someone, talk to us if you want to, get in touch. And
just check out, there'll be if you're in the most places in the world, certainly in the westernized world, there'll be a service as well.
Exactly, there's free services.
And if you're not sure and you can't find that, you can talk to the police.
Exactly.
They can usually steer you in the right direction.
Yeah, police or your GP, your doctor. Okay.
Yeah, but don't take the risk. If in doubt, get some guidance, especially and as early as you possibly can, even if it's only just a subtle feeling of discomfort or doubt. Check it out.
Yeah, honour yourself by checking that out. How do we treat children that we love? If a child comes to us and says they're worried about something, we generally, most of us won't say, "Oh, don't be silly." We'll listen, and we'll check it out first before we kind of just dismiss whatever it is. So do that same thing for yourself. Don't dismiss yourself. Don't dismiss your hunches and your feelings and your intuition. And
just quickly before we end, the best thing you can do, if you have a friend or anyone that you know that you think is experiencing this, the most important thing you can do is maintain their relationship at all costs and maintain the contact at all costs. Because apparently what a common thing that friends do is they become frustrated and they say, well, why don't you just leave him? I don't understand why you're doing that, and I'm not going to collude with you. Unless you leave him and do something about it, I'm not going to talk to you anymore. That's the worst thing to do. It's not colluding, but if that person becomes isolated, they're in much more danger. And it might be a while. You might have to be patient. And like Gwendoline said, there's that level of denial, and it can take so long for people to realise that it's an issue. So keep talking to them. That
can be really tricky, because if someone's in a situation where they're with someone that you hate, maybe even, and sometimes that happens. We hope that it's generally more it's not as serious as all of that. Sometimes we just feel irritated by our best friend's partner or our good friend's, husband or what. We don't necessarily like them, but we can tolerate them and there isn't abuse going on. But where there is, I think Markie's right. And if it feels actually harmful to you, because it can be very harmful to get involved in situations where there's abuse going on, it feels emotionally toxic to you as the friend, right? Observing what's going on. And it's not to deny that, because that is probably true. But I agree with Markie. And I think one way you could do it is you could say, how about we agree that, okay, I don't like your partner, but can we do like a Sunday check-in? We text each other and just say, hey, every week or something like that, so that it becomes manageable, but that you don't break that contact. Because as well, just remember that your friend or your person who you're worried about, they probably really, on some level, are unsure themselves. It's quite possible. But again, the admitting of it is so impossible, because once we admit something, we admit it. We can't really go back on ourselves. We've come into another level of awareness. And so even if that person on some level does know it, they don't necessarily want to articulate it because it makes it more real. And then they feel they have to act on it, which they kind of do really eventually, even though that's not exactly true. But the point is, I would agree with Markie, be patient, see if you can find a way, or an email every week or every month, whatever you can do, whatever you can manage to stay in contact with them. And remember how much you love them as much as they're driving you nuts,
This is horrible watching somebody.
It is.
When you see they're putting themselves in danger and they won't do anything about it, that's terrible.
And often, quite often as well, it's not even just that the abuse is going on between the partner, let's say husband and wife. The girlfriend, if I'm saying, again, these are a bit of heteronormative examples, but let's say it's the woman a female friend that you're worried about, or another person that you're worried about, then they themselves can become abusive. They can become abusive because, it just creates more of the same if we're in toxic situations often, I find. So, it's also possible that you could feel like you're on the receiving end of abuse, and you don't want that, and I understand why. If you are really concerned, just think of it this way. You might be you might be the person's last hope between, life and death, actually, ultimately, So, that's just something to keep in mind, really.
And it is, death, sadly, it's very common from this situation. It's very frightening. I can't remember the stats. Can you remember the stats? But it's frighteningly common.
It was one woman a week dying in the UK.
And over here, I think, as well. Or is it one a day here, I think? I think it might be one a day.
I don't even know. I haven't checked recently. Yeah.
It's something like, whatever you think it is, double it, or it's higher than you'd ever possibly imagine. So just really one very quick kind of final safety thing to finish on. We talked about you going to specialist agencies, and you talked about maybe talking to therapists and things, and that's all really good. But if you're in a situation where you suspect physical danger, got to that stage and you actually feel that you're physically you're in danger of assault. I'm not necessarily talking about murder, but just any kind of physical assault, then police, unless you're in a country where the culture of the police is that they collude this kind of violence, because that does happen. Sometimes they take the side, and they always take the side of the male. But you'll know enough about your own culture. Physical threat, police every time.
African Americans as well, and the African Americans listening to that.
Yeah, you don't get shot.
No, exactly. So you'll have to think a bit harder about who you actually call. And in that case, I would say if you've got a physician who's trustworthy, then they would be your first port of call. And I hope that you at least would have that safe harbour. But yeah, definitely. Well said, Markie. Thank you so much, guys, for sitting with us for this one. Really important. Do share it. Remember to hit that like button, subscribe. You're welcome to subscribe to my channel. Also, look at the description box. I'll link that video where I'm singing it, because I learnt the song to sing it, and I've got a series called Singing in My Kitchen. So if you want to have a listen, you'll know the song if you like R&B. Thanks again, guys, for being here with us. We appreciate it, and we'll see you in the next one.
Thanks to you for joining me.
You're welcome, Markie. Always a pleasure.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.